These are the 5 secrets to success in Dynasty football. Let's go. Tip number 1, always rank talent over depth chart. Some rookies are obviously going to start day one, but most of the time those are going to be quarterbacks that you know are going to be there from day one. And, maybe a top 5 pick at receiver or running back. But just because they're, on the depth chart and they're maybe second or third on the depth chart, because the coach wants to give the veteran running back or the veteran receiver reps. What you have to understand is with rookies, they won't give you too much value until the second half of the season. So you need to look for guys who obviously have the opportunity to play, and don't be scared of where they're placed at on the depth chart. Tip number 2, age is definitely just not a number. I don't care what they tell you. And if you don't believe me, just ask R. Kelly. In redraft football, having an aging running back or an aging wide receiver or even an aging quarterback isn't too important because you're only playing for that season. But in Dynasty football, age, contract, all of that matters because you have these players for the long haul. You're not getting new players every single season. You're drafting new rookies, but they're not drafting the majority of your team. Anywhere between 85 to 90% of your team is pretty much set in stone year after year. So what you don't want is your team looking like an old folks home. You don't want a bunch of aging players who are at the end of their prime or old and busted. You need some new hotness. Sometimes you can trade players based off a name value and you get something in return. In other words, maybe trade a DeAndre Hopkins and a Devin Singletary for a Tank Dell. Now, obviously, that's just an analogy. That's probably something you couldn't do towards the end of the season, but towards the beginning of the season, maybe 4 or 5 games into the season, that was easily a trade you could have done last year. Now, that being said, I'm also not saying trade, a 6th-round running back. Now, in that same sense, I'm obviously not saying trade a Zach Charbonnet for a CMC straight up. Obviously, be smart about it and be strategic, but keep in mind, age is not just a number. Tip number 3, F them picks. Everybody wants to have, a buttload of draft picks, and, it looks cool to look on your, fantasy app and see that you have, 6 first-rounders, 7 second-rounders, 8 third-rounders. I mean, and that's all fine and dandy. But for one, you can't keep all those players. For two, those draft picks are not going to help you win and contend this year. So what you need to understand is, yes, those draft picks do have value, but you need to use those draft picks for leverage. Use those draft picks in trade situations to get you better players. Trade a, tier 2, tier 3 player and a future draft pick for a tier 1 player. You're going to have years where you really need to rebuild. Whether your players are getting old, they're injury prone, whatever the case may be. But if you're rebuilding for 5 years straight, 10 years, you're rebuilding, you're nowhere near the playoffs, you're nowhere near the championships, why are you even playing? Yes, rebuilding and getting rookie players and a ton of draft picks, that's fun. Yes, I get that. But at the end of the day, if you're not playing to win, then why are you playing? Tip number 4, elite wide receivers hold more value than elite running backs. Let me repeat myself. Elite wide receivers hold more value than elite running backs. An elite running back timeline might be 3 to 4 years, where an elite wide receiver can get you upwards of 5 to 7 years of production. So you're looking at the longevity. Again, in a dynasty format, longevity is everything. One-hit wonders will help you. That's usually not a staple of a championship roster. Those players will help you get there, but they're not going to be there every year. And it's very difficult to hit on one-hit wonders. At the end of the day, it definitely takes a little luck to do that. With the running backs, more touches is going to lead to more hits, which is going to lead to more games missed, which is going to lead to a shorter career. Elite wide receivers hold value. On top of that, you have more options at the wide receiver position where they'll play 3 to 4 of them each game. With running backs, most of the teams are going by, running back by committee. But those elite guys, you're only going to have one of them on the field at the time. And tip number 5, the off season is still in season. Injuries, legal troubles, roster moves, things like that can go under the radar in the off season, so you always have to pay attention. There's plenty of websites that keeps up with all season news for all 32 teams, and I really shouldn't have to say this, but if you're playing in a dynasty league, you're obviously going to want to keep update on your team all year round. That being said, it's never too late or too early to negotiate. There's no time limit on when you can trade players. There's no time limit on when you can scour the waiver wire. There's no time limit when you can make roster constructions. That's the fun thing about Dynasty League. It's never turned off. Thanks for tuning in to today's video. Remember, subscribe to see more content from me and everyone here at Just in Time Media.